GRGR show? You know, it's funny, I had some time to think about this question, and of course, you know, being, as Rue was calling me in an interview, the grand poobah of GRGR, I know what the questions are, and I get to see everybody else's interviews. So, and it's funny because one of the memories that has come up a lot, which is obviously the memory of Pittsburgh, when Dave, you know, when we got the call that Dave was getting our road manager Gary's his face tattooed on his ass. So, and I have to say, like, Pittsburgh, I have a really fun memory of that show because I also got my tattoo in Pittsburgh. I don't know if you can see this, but GRGR, my little GRGR, and that was my first tattoo, and I always wanted to get a tattoo when I was on tour with a rock band, and I did. But actually, you know, I've been doing GRGR for a long time, and longer than a lot of the people, like Eva Maurice that came on a few years later, and Michelle and Rue, they've kind of been there from the get-go, and I have this great memory of, like, driving in Ithaca from, I think, Elmira to Ithaca for a show. I think this was pre-tour. It was the year before tour, when we were just doing these one-offs and going to different markets. And I think it was then, or maybe it was the first year, I don't know, it all kind of blends together. But we're driving in Ithaca, and it's kind of rainy and crappy, and the sun starts coming out. And then this big rainbow, like, comes across the whole sky from one end to the other as we're driving up to the haunt, to rock the haunt. So that was pretty cool, too. Well, probably not enough. It's been, you know, it's been a quiet couple of years musically for me, and also for Girls Rock and Girls Roll, you know, since we came off tour. I live in Florida now, and I traveled down there a couple of winters in a row to work, because I had to work, because unfortunately GRGR doesn't pay me a salary. But, you know, I'm still writing and trying to figure out where I want to take my music next. Obviously, I don't have the full G-Spot band down there. I'm trying to get Donald to come down there and play some bass, but I'm trying to get back into it again. I've got a couple of shows coming up, like, you know, solo Unplugged down in Florida, and I'd love to record again. I did record one song called Faith, I think it was like 2 years ago. Right after the tour. It was kind of a little chiller, mellower, less hard rock. But it's been a little bit quiet for me musically, so I'm trying to get back to that, and I'm hoping this will be the year when my music kind of comes back into the forefront of my life a little more. So maybe I'll find a band in Florida. You know, who knows? We'll see. Well, G-Spot will be kind of reunited. Donald will be playing, and Glenn will be playing guitar for us, and Andrea on drums. Musically, I think we don't really have anything new that we're playing, but we are playing some really old stuff, which is kind of cool. Like, we're playing a couple of songs from our very first album, so I'm looking forward to that. And actually, I do have another surprise for the show, but I can't say what it is because then it wouldn't be a surprise, because it's a Girls Rock and Girls Roll surprise. Steve knows what it is. You know, I was thinking about this question earlier today because I knew it was coming up, and I was watching, kind of taking a look at some of the other interviews, and you know what, I really do, because if you look at what's going on still musically in the world, and you know, you still don't see a lot of girls. They're making rock music, but you don't see them, you don't hear about them. You know, they're still kind of under the radar, and you know, we saw so many and played with so many great bands on tours that were on the tour, and throughout the years with Girls Rock and Girls Roll, throughout the past 10 years that we're doing metal and hard rock, and you know, and all these different things, and you just, you know, still what you hear and what you see out there commercially on the radio is a lot of pop and folk, and girls being really, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, just not really showcased as themselves and really rocking out. So for that reason, I think so. And then, you know, listening to everybody else's ideas of what we might do and where they'd like to see us in 10 years, which I know is another question coming up. You know, I was like, wow, you know, there's still a passion for this, and there's still a reason to do this. And so I hope that we can keep it going and, you know, continue to bring more, you know, more women to the forefront, and you know, and doing these types of music that I think people still don't expect, you know, women to be doing. So yeah, I do still feel like there's a hole, and that's why we positioned Girls Rock and Girls Roll more on the harder side of things, because there were a lot of organizations for women making music, but they tended to be more of that singer-songwriter, girl with the guitar, folky kind of thing, and there just didn't seem to be a home for women doing the harder stuff. And even though my music is probably taking a turn towards, it'll never be like, I don't think, super mellow, but it's definitely shifted, I think, a little bit out of the harder punk. I just still think for bands up and coming, and what I see when I band coach at Willie Mae Rock Camp and what those young girls are doing, I definitely think they need that kind of support. Where would I like to see GRGR in the next 10 years? Well, first of all, I'd like to see it continue for the next 10 years. In the perfect ideal world, it would be great if we could do bigger things and have the resource. Our challenge, I think, has always been financial resources, personnel resources. Everybody has done this for all these years as a passion project. We don't get paid for it, and it makes it difficult because people's lives change and they have different priorities. Or even myself, like at some point I had to go and work, so if we could, find a way that we could get some more resources supporting us so that we could do bigger things, so that we could take it to the next level. We did so much those 2 years we were touring. We put so much time and energy and effort, and I think in 2008 we did like 16 or 15 shows, and it was amazing. And so, I'd like to find a way that we could be doing bigger things. It'd be great to see, maybe doing some kind of a 3-day festival where there's workshops and, like a CMJ, but all for girls rock and girls roll, or, doing some kind of bigger event with some bigger name acts supporting us. Toyed with the idea of trying to do something down in Florida since I live down there now, like maybe a girls rock and girls roll mini tour. And it might be kind of cool to do like a girls rock and girls roll rock camp. So those are some of the kind of, if I had my perfect world and we had the support and the ability to do it. But hopefully we can keep it going, and maybe it'll experience some regrowth over the next few years. And it was great to hear actually all of the other girls in there were the now interviews talking about where they would like to. I love Rue's idea of touring the world with Rue and Hugh. I think that's great. I'd totally be down with that. So, but it was good to hear, that they still felt there was a need and their passion and their vision. So maybe if we can all put our vision together and we can create that reality. I think that young girls who want to start a rock band, or any woman that wants to play rock music, just get out there and do it. Don't let anybody tell you who to be or what you can and can't do. That's really, be yourself. Don't try to, there's, play an instrument, write some songs. And I had a lot of people, I feel like early on when I was first doing music, that I had a lot of people that supported me and I had people that didn't. And I didn't think I was a good singer, and so I compensated with other things, but I just kept doing it anyway because I just loved it so much and it was so much fun. And I just think, you got to get out there, you got to do it, you got to be yourself, find a mentor and practice, take lessons. I took vocal lessons for years, I took songwriting workshops. So that stuff does help, it does help give you a little bit of structure and preparedness for shows and different things. But just get out there and do it, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't. Well, I would like to see Janis Joplin come back from the dead and headlining a GRGR show. So, I don't know, maybe if I do enough yoga, I can like channel her or something. To do anyway. But, yeah, but realistically, that's probably not going to happen, although you never know. But, some of the people I'd like to see, some people maybe in our group might disagree with me, but I'd love to see Alanis Morissette headlining a GRGR show. Sheryl Crow would be cool. Courtney Love, that'd be fun. Who else was I thinking about? Heart. I'd love to see, that would be very cool. Have Anna Nancy Wilson headlining a Girls Rock and Girls Roll show, because they were kind of like one of the original, girls that were rocking when a lot of women weren't, and they're great musicians. Nancy Wilson is like this amazing guitar player. So I think some of those types of folks. It's unfortunate, when you start thinking about who's around right now. There's just, and you want to attach that name because obviously that's going to help us build our name and build our brand and generate more publicity, but there's just not a ton of women that I can think of that are commercially successful. Although and of course, whoever was headlining, we'd have to have all the core bands and some of the great alumni and everything playing. But I will tell you kind of a funny story. I got this very weird phone call a couple of months ago from someone, and it was this guy, and he's like, he was asking me about Revolutionary Records, and he's like, well, do you think you could help us? I have an artist. Do you think you could help us, like, do something with this artist, or blah, blah, blah? And I was like, well, what do you need? What are you looking for? I'm like, we're not really a record label in a sense. You know, we're the umbrella arm for Girls Rock and Girls Rule, and we do these shows. And he said, well, you know, she's a big name artist, and she just played Madison Square Garden, and, you know, we'd like to set up some shows with you guys. And I still to this day don't know if I was being punked. So I said, well, you know what, if you're interested in that, we can talk more, we can set up a meeting. But he wouldn't tell me at first who it was. And so I'm like, okay, this is a load of crap. Then he called me back like a week or two later, and he told me that the artist was Lady Gaga. And I just was like, okay, well, I said, well, I'm going to be in New York in about a week. If you want to set up a meeting, we can certainly talk about it, you know, and because I still was very skeptical, but I never did hear back from him after that. So I don't know if I was being punked or if it was actually someone calling for Lady Gaga, because, you know, it was very strange. And although she's not to me like pure GRGR, if Lady Gaga asked us to do a show for her, certainly we would do that.
You're just trouble with a capital T. Just a princess.